This morning in my email, I received an email from 4 a.m. from the daily Talmud page of the day, emailed out from the Steiner Center in Jerusalem. And sometimes the daily Talmud page is very interesting material I never would have found myself. After all, there's some 7,000 pages in the Talmud. You're bound to miss something. And some days it seems irrelevant, and I'm curious why they spent so much time on this in Jewish tradition. But every day I receive that email, I'm receiving a gift, because I was told about this email. I was encouraged to read this email by a friend of mine who I had expected to become a colleague of mine. His name is David Steiner. We are celebrating a first this evening. It is the first honorary ordination that the Institute has conferred. Normally, honorary degrees are a positive celebratory thing, and this will be as well. But it's not in the circumstance of a Lifetime Achievement Award, although in some ways it is also that. 11 months ago, I was shocked and saddened to learn of David's sudden death in Africa. He was doing what he loved. He was spending time with youth. He was creating a movie experience. He was sharing his own creativity. He was building connections, and he was teaching lessons. And he was in the home stretch of the goal of many, many years to finally become a rabbi. What can I say about him tonight? My friend, my almost colleague, celebrating reaching a life goal after your life is over. I want to draw on some of the thoughts I shared at his memorial service, although I forgot to bring the hat I wore at the service. It was at a conservative synagogue where the requirement was to cover your head for men, something I don't normally choose to do. But in this case, David had asked people, or the family had asked people on David's behalf, to bring Cubs wear. Since David was an inveterate Cubs fan, I happen to have a Chicago Cubs hat written Cubs in Hebrew letters on the hat. And so it was a perfect solution, but I left it at home. David loved to teach, and he loved to learn using classic Jewish texts. One of his favorite Talmudic stories described 4 rabbis who entered a garden of Pardes, of paradise, exploring the deepest truths of life. It became the basis for a screenplay that he wrote, but it also reflects the many-sided nature of David himself. Ben Azai looked and died. Ben Zoma looked and went mad. Elisha ben Avuya cut the shoots. Akiva entered in peace and departed in peace. Part of David was Rabbi Akiva, entering in peace and departing in peace, deeply connected to Jewish observance, tradition, and literature, though on his own terms. Part of David was Elisha ben Avuya, cutting the shoots, a heretic rabbi who questioned divine justice and providence, who was willing to challenge authority in the name of human dignity. And David became Ben Azai, the deceased who lost his life living out his sense of himself as a Jew and as a mensch, a decent human being. David was a new take on the wandering Jew. He was the wandering rabbinic student. From the Hebrew Seminary for the Deaf in Chicago, when I first met him several years ago, to the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, to ultimately studying with me at the IISHJ. He shared with me his love for Habonim Dror's Camp Tavor, where my daughter has now attended for several years, including having 2 of David's children as her counselors. But his Jewishness ran very deep. He finished high school in Israel at Hakfar HaYarok. He served in the Israeli Defense Forces. He lived in Israel for 2 stints, including active work with Bina, the secular yeshiva. He said Tel Aviv was always the home of his heart. He was the director of congregational Jewish education at both Reform and conservative synagogues, and he was a Hebrew teacher and tutor at my humanistic congregation. David was a Jewishly literate, secular Jew. He loved the distinction that the Israeli writer Ari Alon makes between ribonut and rabbanut. Rabbanut is the external authority, the rabbi telling you what to do. Ribonut is the self-authority, the sovereignty of being able to decide for yourself. Once when in rabbinical school in Israel, he was told, next day for class, bring the Siddur, bring the prayer book. And so he couldn't accept that simply. He didn't think there was only one prayer book, and so he brought a book of Chaim Nachman Bialik poetry to class the next day. And the teacher said, I told you to bring the Siddur. He said, this is my Siddur. These poems speak to me more deeply. David was always many things. He was a cow midwife. He actually was in charge of the dairy cows. He claimed it qualified him to assist his wife in home births. She didn't accept it. He was an educational software developer with a PhD in education. He was a property manager. He was a documentary filmmaker, a typewriter collector, a Cubs fan whose heavenly temple was Wrigley Field, and who did reach the promised land before he died. He was a mediator who was a fantastic listener and pursuer of peace. He was an advocate for causes and institutions he believed in. He was a loving son and life partner and Abba and father, and a wonderful friend who always made time to catch up on long phone conversations, who loved to laugh and share stories. And he empowered others. When he started to create a film about an African-American cultural charter school named Barbara Sizemore Academy, he didn't simply film the students. He put the cameras in their hands and let them film the school from their perspective for us to see through their eyes. We'll be showing that documentary that he made. It's won awards and is showing at many film festivals tomorrow evening at 7:30. You're all very welcome to come back to see his work. In the very first saying, attributed to Rabbi Hillel in Pirkei Avot, the sayings of the ancestors in the Mishnah, Hillel says, Heveni tamidav shel Aharon, ohev shalom, v'rodef shalom, ohev et habriot, u'mekarban l'Torah. Be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving all of the creatures on the earth, and bringing them closer to wisdom. That was David's life. Loving peace, pursuing peace, loving humanity, and bringing wisdom, both Jewish wisdom and his own personal wisdom, to the world. And many of us who knew him loved him back. In Hebrew, the way to make a title honorary is to add the word kavod, which means honor. So an honorary rabbi is Rav Kavod, which also means a great honor. With joy for having known him, and with sadness that he is not here to receive it, I want to read the certificate of honorary ordination. The International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism posthumously confers upon David J. Steiner, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be a blessing, the title of Honorary Rabbi Rav Kavod, in light of his lifetime of study, teaching, and celebration of Jewish life and culture. It is signed by 3 rabbis, as ordination certificates typically are, and it asks the question, Yara, did he teach? Yara, he taught. Hiskil, did he enlighten? Hiskil, he did enlighten. I would like to invite all of David's family and close connections who are here to come forward to receive the certificate and to your applause for David's life.
It's a great honor to be receiving this award on behalf of my dad today. One thing I can say for certain is that no other Jewish person, let alone a rabbinical student, claims that the most spiritual place to them is Wrigley Field. Sorry, Rabbi Shalom took a lot of my fire. I hope this shows you what an unconventional kind of guy he was. My dad was a man of many talents. His first job was as a rough time or cow farmer at the Kfar Harok, which was his high school in Israel. Then he went on to UCLA and studied film, worked on TV stations for a while, then he was a building manager, a building owner, then Jewish educator, school teacher, rabbinical student, mediator, and finally a filmmaker. Throughout all of this, he was a student as well. When my dad finished his dissertation on peace in the Middle East, he looked to my sisters and I and said, "Now you call me Dr. Abba." Soon when I finish rabbinical school, you will call me Rabbi Dr. Abba. This was back in 2007 when he started his rabbinical studies. Here we are 10 years later, and I am so proud of my dad for his long time work at the goal of one day becoming a rabbi. he would have kicked so much butt on the stage. Thank you.